supported by the two universities. How wonderful. Oh, and let me just introduce our three panelists. The first is Ronaldo Castillo, and the second is Aswin, and later the third is the Chibita. I'm sorry, I am so badly in pronounce like some Southeast Asia name. So, and I would like to just brief a little bit our rule about the presentation. So the first, every panelist will have the 18 minutes. I'm sorry. Since we have three papers, so every paper should be presented in 15 minutes. And after three papers being presented, and we will collect questions from our audience. And the second is, I'm sorry. Before we collect the questions, of course we invite Ms. Rahim to give some comments on the three papers. Also, I'm sorry, the only one. The other two is me. Sorry, I'm nervous because this I just took over the moderator. So I am also honestly I am not familiar with their topic. They are professional in this topic. I just like a general reader. So okay, so first would be the Mr. Ronald. He's from the Central University. Also, they are years mate. They are also they are PhD candidate student, the rising star, the young generation scholars from the international doctorate program in Asia Pacific. Okay, so let's welcome the first panelist, Ronald Castillo. Let's give the applause.
Dr. Lin. Good morning, everyone. As the first speaker for this panel, I would like to welcome everyone, and I would like to say that this panel is such a very Southeast Asian panel. I come from the Philippines, Aswin comes from Indonesia, and Chitipat comes from Thailand. And there is also another particular sense that I feel for this panel, particularly for mine, because the theme for the conference here today is about recovery recovery amidst what's going on right now with the pandemic. And for my own presentation, it's about recovering from the democratic decline, that particular phenomenon. I'm Ronald Castillo. I'm assistant professor at the University of Santo Tomas in Manila, but I'm not assistant professor for now. I'm Mr. Ronald Castillo, a student of the International Doctoral Program in Asia Pacific Studies at Chenta University. This is my QR code if you would like to see my other publications as listed in ORCID. I will display the QR code later again. Okay, the outline, the problem, I made it short in the outline, but there's a lot of things to discuss. The problem, the methodology and findings, and what's our puzzle for this discussion. So I ponder about what's going on right now in the Philippines because the regime of Rodrigo Duterte is plagued with a lot of rhetoric. And when we think about rhetoric of propaganda and the state, then there's two sides. Sometimes rhetoric and propaganda is made out of lies. Sometimes it's made to help build up the state. In the case of the Philippines, we in the Philippines have an entire history of populist politicians who use a lot of rhetoric. We have President Magsaysay who used the slogan, "Magsaysay is our guy." Joseph Ejercito Estrada, who appealed to the poor. Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, who instead of appealing to the poor, emphasized the strength of her presidency. And lastly, with Noynoy Aquino, who again appealed to the people that you, the people, are my boss. I, the president, am not the boss. You are the boss. And during the time of Rodrigo Duterte, it's already the turn of the second decade of the 21st century. Rodrigo Duterte gave us all this rhetoric. Tapang at malasakit means bravery and compassion. Matapang means brave. And at the same time, all these very nice statements coincide with rape jokes. He was joking with his soldiers to allow soldiers to commit rape and it's okay. He was saying about how beautiful women is okay to be kissed without their permission, that women can just be touched by men. And he red tags people who speak up against his government. In this democratic decay in the Philippines, there are several literature already, but I sum it up in this progression from Coquerel, Jeffery, Morgan, and Alexander. Because the populism in the Philippines, sometimes populism isn't really as bad, but there's a distasteful element of populism. Because populist candidates appeal to the people and usually try to stay in power. And what's going on right now in the Philippines is that in the time of social media, the populists control so much of the discourse because people talk a lot in social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. And because of that, Duterte and his party was able to capture Philippine democracy. That's why we have democratic decline in the Philippines. So when I was searching for a solution to this problem, Coquerel tells us that art fosters social cohesion. In comparison to what Duterte is doing, that he's dividing people with his rhetoric. Jeffery and Karen Corayil said that art is a depository of memory, telling us that people who have undergone systematic change in a country can go back into the past because of what art has recorded. Morgan related populism with social engagement and thus civic repair. Because when we have populism, the candidate is engaging with the people. And at the same time, the opposite of populism, that civic repair, is also social engagement. So these two opposite things, civic repair solves populism in Morgan's argument, and in Alexander's argument, performances and expressions which lead us back to art can help in civic repair. The gap that I'm trying to fill in this research is how does art create civic repair in order to combat populism and thus democratic decline? This is my research question. So how does particular protest art, what's going on in the Philippines, contribute to civic repair? The methodology that I use, actually, I was developing this as a paper for Professor DC's class. And at that time, what I was doing was, I'm here in Taiwan, I'm observing what's going on in the Philippines by going through narratives from news reports of what's going on in the country. And then I also gathered narratives from Asian Survey. And I also got discussions of experts from reputable journals. I was thinking that given all those secondary data, I can already develop my argument on this because we're talking about art. And then sometime during the summer, last summer, June and July, one of the artists of the Philippines posted on his Facebook how he is being attacked by the trolls of the enemy. We can't say that it's the 30%, but because they are trolls. But he was being attacked. So what I did was, I applied for ethical board permission to contact the artists and to interview them. I had to ask for permission from an ethics board first because artists, protest artists are vulnerable people. They are combating politicians, so they have a certain degree of danger to themselves if they talk to me. So, the primary source is that I have the top 5 protest artists in the Philippines on a Zoom with me and gave me their experiences as artists protesting what's going on in Manila. The findings. I have 4 spaces of discourse, and for each space, so what space is going on, for each space, we have the genre of discussion, what happens there as a positive result, and what negative encounters happen. So this space is called what I call limited access space. When I was developing this, I call this private art, the space of private art. But not all private art is private per se. There is public art that's limited. For example, if we have literature and books, those are public. But if you have a piece of book, you have to buy the book. So only the people with money can buy the book. So you can't get the art, you can't get the message in there. So in the development of my idea, I changed private space into limited access space. Next part. And the space of public street life. So again, when we think about spaces, there's public and private space. So I changed private space into limited access, and I changed public space into not any ordinary public space, but street life. Like if you go to the market, if you go to the night market, there's life there. You see people buying things. You see people talking to each other. And there are people talking, hey, did you attend that class by Professor this and that? Hey, do you know what happened in London yesterday? The Prime Minister resigned. So people are talking. So, for example, a public street life, spaces of civic activity are rallies and wall arts. So if you have a night market and there's a wall there, and you make a painting there, everybody passing by sees the painting, hey, what is this going on here? What is this about? So people talk. And that's part of democracy, and that's part of the discourse of combating rhetoric. We have murals, posters, effigies, and cosplays. So what negative happens there? There's threats of arrests, of police violence. If you go to the streets and you make a painting on the wall and you do not have permission, you can get arrested. Sometimes you have permission and you can still get arrested because they would first assume that something wrong is going on and you can't fight. This is a narrative by one of the protest artists. The code name is Marian Hukom, Mary the Judge. And she was afraid of going out at the time because some of her friends were arrested while they were doing posters on the street. And the third space is cyberspace, the internet. And what happens in the internet? We have social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And the kind of art that we have are web comics and satires. And the positive engagement is that people react. You put your like, you put your hearts, okay? And people comment, and you encounter trolls. Like if you go out, there can be dogs, they can bite you, but if you go into the cyberspace, there are trolls coming from possibly Duterte or Bongbong Marcos. We have one particular sample here. This is not my art, obviously. This is the art of Tarantadong Kalbo in the Philippine language. In English, it means the bald jerk, because he is engaging the jerkness of Duterte. And I was pointing this out because the head of Tarantadong Kalbo, the bald guy, looks like the COVID virus. This is one of his famous art, that particular one. It's called Tumindig. It translates to straighten up in some news reports, but it's best translated as stand up. And this was the original art. And what is this? Several student organizations in the Philippines made their own versions of Tumindig. Tumindig is that these people are bowing down to Duterte, but this particular single one is standing up, fight. And so many people followed him. Students, civic organizations, NGOs. So out of one, there became many, and out of many, there became one people in cyberspace. And from cyberspace, it was used even in the streets when people were protesting against Duterte. So much so that they even animated the particular Tumindig. You can see the bowing people standing up. The final space, ladies and gentlemen, is not a space where art exists per se. I call it the vacuum. When we say vacuum, it's the absence of something. And this vacuum is the absence of ideas. Because in this cyberspace, it's invaded by the lies of the new president, Bongbong Marcos, who even says that all the brutalities that happened during his father's time were all lies. Like, people died under Ferdinand Marcos, and he's saying that those are lies. And he's trying to revise history. So this is a vacuum of political knowledge. So we need more art because these arts preserve the knowledge of the present. But before I continue to that, okay, these are the four functions. As we observed in the four spaces a while ago, the art expresses the issues. When you see the art, what's going on? Oh, this is about what Duterte did. Okay, or what Bongbong did, or this is what that particular politician did, doing corruption. It makes people talk about it, and it extends the reach. Even people who do not know what's going on will eventually hear about it. And lastly, it preserves the political knowledge of what's going on at the time. So that even if people try to revise history, the fact is there. It's preserved in the art. As a summary, protest art has four functions, as I mentioned a while ago. And this can be used as testable. I didn't test it. I narrated observations across four spaces. But future studies can try to test it. You can measure it, which among the spaces are better than the other. Its affective and cognitive variables can still be tested. And finally, we have the illness of democratic decline, and I propose the solution of protest art because it engages society to fight back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for Mr. Ronald's presentation. The presentation is very impressive, especially the slide. Everyone get hands up, not hands up, stand up, and also hijack you say the target, the symbol. Yeah, that's very interesting. And later we'll invite the second presenter. Okay. It's been okay. Let's see. Mr. Aswin's presentation. So.
Good afternoon. My name is Aswin. Oh, sorry. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Aswin. I'm Ronald's classmate in Chongqing University. Oh, yeah, 我是李小柱. I am Indonesian, I'm ethnic Chinese, so this topic is something that really interesting because indirectly it threatens like my life as minorities. I mean, I don't have my life threatened, but I mean, for most of minorities, this topic is really matters now because, like it or not, democracy brings polarization, and sometimes people can be very violent because of like polarization, like it or not. So yeah, my case is simple. Comparative studies, comparative to case studies in my country, Indonesia and Myanmar. Yeah, so this is my research question. To make it simple, what is the difference, what is the similarities, and what's the future prospect for like religious nationalism in these two countries? Okay, first, what is religious nationalism? So basically, religion, nationalism, you just mix that. So like you can see in the screen. So basically, you cannot separate the religious aspect from the nationalism itself. Nationalism, like I think since Donald Trump become president, become something very, very sexy to discuss. Because people already cannot see the difference between what is patriotism and what is nationalism. Maybe if you speak Chinese, it's easy to make it difference, you know, like 民族 and 爱国. If you separate word by word, you can see the differences. But you know, in English, what is nationalism and what is patriotism? And like, yeah, people think they are patriot, but technically they bring cultural aspect, and for this case is religion aspect. So first study case in Myanmar. I want to discuss about Bata organization, but let me discuss about the predecessor first. So they have 969 movement. For Theravada Buddhism, this means something. So this is like devotion to the Buddha itself, the Dharma, and the monks association or the Sangha. So 969 represent these three Buddhist Theravada entity, and then the perpetrator is Asidwiratu, started 2012, very close with President Thein, which is from military background. In Myanmar, they are dominated by Burmese race, Burman people. I usually make a joke, it's the 2B in Myanmar, Buddhist Burman. They control mostly everything, like politics, people's livelihood. And then this 969 has very strong lobby in Myanmar government. As a civil society, their voice is very strong. And then, why did they mean 969? Because they consider Muslims as enemies. And in Myanmar, Muslims business, they will use 786. In Arabic, it can be interpreted like Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, like in the name of Allah, the most gracious and merciful. Why they put 786? Is to make it easy, like 786. Oh, the boss of the business is Muslim. The product guaranteed halal, 100%. So it to make it people like easy to like for customers it's very easy, but it's also make them vulnerable because the extremist Buddhists can notice just like, oh, those are Muslim business. Boycott them, don't buy their products. And starting from boycott, it become, let's say, crazier. Like, okay, my son will not marry Muslim. My kids will not hang out with Muslims. And then it evolved into violence. And then, okay, long story short, they got disbanded. And then they react like Wiratu. Okay, I will not stay quiet. I'm gonna fight. So they establish Mahabata, or like in English translation, Patriotic Association of Myanmar. See, patriot, nationalist. That's kind of it's not the same, but they claim themselves to be patriot that defending Theravada Buddhism in Myanmar. So they basically considered like, because back then Myanmar still ruled by Aung San Suu Kyi, which is, I will not say she's democratic actor, but better than the military junta at least. And then in the end, they cannot take it anymore. Like 969, Mabata also disbanded, but they immediately create Buddhist Dhamma Charitable Foundation, which is also banned, and basically they cannot be banned 100% because the military junta provide them with finance. So like any other government, they have budget for civil society, or sometimes me, Ronald, and Bill make a joke like, this is not civil society, this is uncivil society. So second case, my country, FPI. Sorry, I didn't put the. It's clear. This is, the English name is Islamic Defensive Front, and they established in 1998. They enjoy democratization of Indonesia. Indonesia become like democratic after 32 years of dictatorship. So everybody enjoy that. Let's establish civil society. Let's establish political party. Let's establish this, that. They enjoy access for like freedom to political freedom. Basically, it's political freedom. And then in their imagination, they think that, oh, Muslim people are suffering in Indonesia. The implementation of the religion, rules of religion is very weak. Societies become like infected by infidelity. And then we have to man dictate as the majority citizens. So they established this, and during 1998, there's an event like upper house. The upper house, they will have like meetings, very important meetings, because they will decide who's gonna rule the country after President Suharto stepped down. So they basically gather many organizations to become security, quote unquote security, like civil security. We call it PAM Swakarsa, like public security, not like military security. So this is like informal, and this organization is one of them. And then this is like some highlights. They demanding Sharia law in my country. My country has something similar. Maybe in Taiwan you call it Sanmin Chui. In my country we have 5 principles. The article number 1 is we believe in God. And then in the past we have Jakarta Charter, which is like we believe in God and the obligation to implement Sharia law. But our founding fathers decide, nah man, we are not gonna do that because Indonesia is multicultural, multi-religion. But this organization always demand to do that. And they behave like moral police. They ransack place they consider immoral, like clubs, brothels. And then basically they playing vigilante. So like the one that got suffered the most is ethnic Chinese, because they always claim that, look at those communists. look at those like illegal immigrants. Maybe one of the facts, like some Chinese that come to Indonesia is like nationalists who lost the war back then. They don't want to come to Taiwan. They come to Southeast Asia, which is, we are anti-communist instead of like communist, to be honest. But this organization just blame all Chinese communists. And then they got disbanded, bloody. To be honest, the process is like quite bloody. After the disbandment, police must shot some of the member